What's up, Weekend Warriors? Weekendology Podcast has returned for another episode to save you from your weekly woes. We're the only podcast with the hottest takes, the best talking points, and the stories to spark your weekend conversations. This is the show where we talk about music, movies, sports, and more related to media, and give our takes on how to change and improve them. So strap in. We've got another great episode planned for you guys today. If you're new to the show, welcome. I'm your host, Will Deichley, alongside my ever-so-reliable co-host, Aaron Berg. Aaron, how's everything going for you today?
Oh, man, just being reliable.
You're being reliable. It's around Christmas time, so, Merry Christmas to all of our listeners out there. We can't thank you enough for all the support that you've given us towards the last couple months from when we started this podcast. We hope Santa brings you something special and you land up on the naughty list there. So, Aaron, do you have any Christmas plans, coming up with it being just about a week away?
Yeah, I'm just going back home, going up to Minnesota. That's I usually take 2 trips. One's in the summer and then one's for Christmas. So, always look forward to that and looking forward to freezing. So,
yeah, it's going to be like -7 up there?
No, it shouldn't be that bad. It's going to be, it gets colder usually in like January. So December is not terrible, but it's always that shock when I get up there because it's like 60 now, and then I get up there and it's 25. I'm like, oh my god, this is terrible. But then after a couple of days, you're just used to it and you get over it. And I mean, it's not fun if I have to drive, but it's good to be up there and see the family, and got a couple high school friends I always get back in touch with. So it's fun. It's nice to chill out for a week and not think about work.
Now's the time to do it. Take off work, take off school, whatever. I'm going back up to St. Louis. There's currently 6 inches of snow up there.
Ooh, nice.
So I'm not really looking forward to going up.
And you're always cold, so you're going to freeze.
I'm always freezing. So I'm packing like 17 coats, a couple scarves, and like 3 blankets. So
if it's like 45 degrees, Will's just like freezing. 3 sweatshirts. So
and
I know how you'll be.
That's just what I'm going to be wearing on the airplane. So. We've got a cool episode for you planned today, though. One that's obviously near and dear to us. We're delving into the world of podcasting, discussing the evolution of radio to podcasting and how podcasting has changed the landscape of entertainment. So, back in the days, we had the old radio times. So I would listen to the radio growing up in high school, driving there to school. A lot of it was kind of more inconsistent. There was a lot of ads with it. And then when podcasting jumped onto the mainstream media, it kind of changed the landscape with it and, really changing the whole how media was presented. So we've got a good guest on with us today to talk about that change in podcasting. He's a longtime veteran of radio, 15 plus years. He's the owner of our very own studio here in MZ Studios here in Dallas, Texas. He's got his own podcast show, MZNOW. Please welcome Michael Zavala. Mike, how you doing today?
Good, doing good. Thank you guys for having me on.
Well, thanks for making our interviews possible.
Exactly.
We would not be able to figure out how to interview someone.
Yeah, we thought about doing an interview before we started with you guys. And we're like, well, how are we going to get them to call in and record
this? We looked up all these YouTube videos, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just go on Google and find a studio because I'm...
Yeah, no, it took us a long time to figure it out as well.
Yeah. I listened to a lot of your podcasts as well.
I'm sorry.
No, I think they're great, actually. I really like the dynamic between everybody. You guys have such like a natural cadence for it as well. I try to take little mental notes and be like, okay, I should deliver it.
Don't do this, don't do that. Yeah.
Don't do this, do this that way. But you got such a natural flow to it as well. And obviously the production is really good here.
Thank you.
So we really like our time.
You can tell you're
Studio.
friends. And you got that chemistry. And
we do. Well, we're very good at acting. That's for sure. No, but yeah, a lot of the guys on the show, we've known each other for a long time. And so it translates well when we're ready to do the show. So
and you've been in media for quite a long time. So talk to us about how you started in the podcasting business, or you started in the radio business first, and how you got into the whole gig.
So when I was a little kid, our TV broke, right? And I love cartoons, and our TV broke, and because my mom didn't want us to have access to certain channels, so she had a guy come over to the house, and he took the little buttons out of the TV thing. It was the little, I don't know what it's called now, but it's like you can push the buttons on the TV.
Right, yeah.
And he took the buttons out of the TV and he cracked the, and I remember I was in the hallway and I was watching this. It was like somebody having surgery on my dog or something. You know what I mean? It's like because this is my love. This is what I watch, cartoons.
Stressful,
Yeah. And so I'm like, is it going to be okay? What's going on? And they cracked some circuit board in there, and the TV was done. And
maybe your mom told him to do it.
Yeah, I think so. To this day, I think it's a big conspiracy.
It was a punishment or something.
So, to entertain myself, first off, I've always loved talking. I've had a microphone in my hand since I was, I had a Bugs Bunny tape recorder when I was a little kid, and I used to just talk in it. And I would finish the tape, reverse it, put it back in, and record some more, and then play it back for everyone to listen to. And so to entertain myself, since I didn't have a TV, my dad used to get us these little cassette tapes and CDs of these old-timey radio shows like Abbott and Costello and Jack Benny and things like that. And so I remember really listening to them and really loving them, and then trying to build my own little like sound studio underneath like a little bed or desk or whatever, and try to recreate those. And I used to even play on, like for road trips, I would play a movie and record it on cassette and then listen to it. So I've always loved the audio experience, whether it's radio or audiobooks or, whatever, audio dramas. And so when I was a little kid, I started auditioning to do like little voiceover stuff for radio stations and stuff like that. So I would do all if they needed a kid to come in and read the station liner or whatever, I would come in and do that, or do a character or whatever.
Wow. How old are you?
Right now, 33. I had to think about that. You caught me off guard. That's the only question.
He's 33 today,
yeah,
but
yeah.
At that time.
Tomorrow might be different. I don't know. Yeah. No, at that time I was, I don't know, I was probably 8-ish, something like that. So I used to write people too all the time. I used to write like different shows I liked. I was just very amazed with the world of audio, and whether it's radio or whatnot. And so I'd write DJs. I would always try. You guys aren't from the Dallas area, but there was a big radio DJ named Kid Craddock, who I looked up to when I was a little kid. I used to wake up early. I hate mornings. I would wake up early just to listen to Kid Craddock. Mm-hmm. I used to listen to some terrible shows in Dallas, just to understand, like what you do with our show is, just to see how they did things and whatever. And then I used to volunteer at radio stations, and I used to always want to go to recording studios. And so I used to do voiceover stuff when I was a kid, till probably teenage years. And then I tried very hard to get a gig with my radio icon, Kid Craddock, at the time. And every time they would need like a phone screener or somebody to clean the bathrooms, I would fill out a resume or application and send it in, and never got a call. And so one day I went up there, and I had I stayed for their whole show. They had a little thing where you could view the show outside and sit at a little bench. And I stayed for the whole show, and I waited like 3 hours after the show was done, and because somebody's got to leave this building at some point. So it was a little stalkerish, but Kid comes out, and he's like, "Hey man, what's going on?" And I said, "Hey, my name is Michael Zavala. I've done some stuff with different radio stations and some voiceover stuff and whatever, and I want to work for you." He said, "Well, do you have a resume?" I said, "Well, absolutely." And I pull out the resume I had folded in my back pocket that was all sweaty now, unfolded it, went through my credentials, and then he said, "Well, come and check out the studio." So went around. He goes, "I literally just hired somebody, but I have an idea. Let me call you tomorrow." So he calls me the next day, and he's like, "I want you to do this bit where you need to get the top 5 celebrities on IMDb. Book one of these for us, and I'll give you a job. I don't know what kind of job I'm going to give you, but book one. So you have X amount of days to do it." So we worked really hard. I had a group of friends that we were trying to get all these celebrities on the show, and didn't succeed with the top 5, but I did get him Frank Caliendo.
Oh, I love Frank Caliendo.
Which I thought, if you're not going to get, we're not going to get you one celebrity, we're going to get you 20 celebrities.
Right.
Yeah.
And to this day, Frank is probably one of the 2 celebrities that does not like me. Does not like me. And I don't know exactly why, because I hit him up and I said, "Hey Frank, can you do me a huge favor?" I didn't know who he was. He didn't know who I was. And I said, "Can you do the Kid Craddock show?" And he goes, "Yeah, absolutely. Does Kid want me to do this, or like what's going on?" I said, "Yeah, Kid wants you to do it." Well, Kid obviously is not a big fan of, I didn't know this, of Impressionist. Oh. And so Frank comes on, he does his thing. He does like Jeff Goldblum and,
does the same 10 characters he always does.
And, I love Frank, but he does like, the jokes are written for the impressions, right?
Right.
So he does this whole routine, and you can tell, I'm listening on the radio, at home listening, and you can tell that Kid's not digging this at all.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And I think Frank's getting that vibe, and, they hang up, and then, Kid kind of says some comment about it that it wasn't great. And so I feel really bad, but I'm also grateful for Frank for doing it. So I email Frank, and I said, "Frank, thank you so much. I don't have a lot of money, but next time you and your wife are in town, I'll take you to Chili's. And, I'll get you 2 for 1 or whatever."
There you go.
No response. And years later, when we had our own show and stuff, we tried to book Frank, and anything with my name on it, he won't respond to. We tested it out because we made up a fake name and a fake show and sent him a request, and he replied back right away.
Oh, that's crazy.
But anything with my name,
from Frank Caliendo's area. So that's hilarious.
So, but the offer, if Frank is listening, the offer is still on the table.
Oh, he's definitely listening.
I will take you and your wife to Chili's.
Oh,
so
there you go.
2 for 1.
You hear that, Frank?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can come on the show too.
Right, while you're in town. Do the same 10 impression.
Yeah,
John Madden.
We'll add Frank to the list of people we've called out on the podcast too. So.
Yeah, we have a running tally that we need to get people on the show and defend themselves.
Big name celebrities and everything. We've done Trump before. We've done Michael Wilbon. We've done, who else have we done?
Jay Billis, Tim Legler.
Yeah. A lot of sports people there.
That's cool. Yeah.
But so obviously, you've been in the radio gig for quite a long time, and you started MZ Studios here.
Yeah.
What kind of inspired you to start the studio up and step into the podcasting realm?
So obviously, my career with Kid Craddock did not take off because of Frank Caliendo. That's what I'm thinking of.
He destroyed it.
It's all Frank's fault. Yeah.
Frank did this. So, but I was grateful for Kid for the opportunity to work with him for, I don't know what it was, like 10 days or a month or whatever. I don't know what it was. But it was really nice. And he did that for me. Like that was his thing of saying, hey, let me give you a little exposure. Let me teach you how to do these things and I'll work with you. And I got to work with some of the staff. And so that was nice. I do appreciate it. He's passed away now, but that was his little mark on me. So after that, I'm thinking, well, that door closed. What do we do now? And so I remember talking to a buddy of mine. He goes, there's a thing called internet radio that people are starting to do. And this is like 2006. And he goes, why don't we kind of start our own show? But I'm like, all right, I don't know anything about it. I had dial up at the house. I couldn't listen to anything. And so we reached out to a friend of ours and we started and we had this little office building. And we didn't have it. We were actually we're not even supposed to be in there. We just would go in there once a week and set up equipment. And we did a show and we called it the Michael Zavala Show. And we did that for 2.5 years or a year and a half, something like that. And it, for whatever reason, really took off. Like people loved it.
Your buddy was okay with calling it your show?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was his idea. I didn't want to call because I feel like it's hard. My name is hard to pronounce. So he was like, yeah, we'll just call it the Michael Zavala Show. So he was cool with that. So I was like, all right. Nice. We changed that later on because it is hard to pronounce and people butcher it all the time. So it's not called the Michael Zavala Show anymore. But we did really well with it, and because nobody was really doing it at the time, right? And it was kind of a new venture. And then we did that for a little bit, and then we lost the office room that we were recording in. We couldn't go in there anymore, so we were like, well, what do we do? So we started doing it at people's houses and stuff, and then it just didn't really sound the same. It wasn't really great quality, and we didn't also want to bring in guests to a room where, somebody's dog was. It just was not very
background
professional.
Noises and all that kind of stuff.
So we kind of just dissolved it, and a few years later, or maybe a year and a half later, I came up with an idea to do something a little bit different and kind of more pop culture based and things like that. And so we did a casting call and we started doing a show called MZ Live at that time. And we needed a studio to do that for us. So I looked all over the Metroplex for a studio that would do our show. We'd take phone calls, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And only one person responded. He didn't have the equipment. I had to bring the equipment. And, but he was willing to have us there. And we did that for many years. So long and the short, that ended. We did some other stuff. We decided we were going to do another show years later. And I didn't want to go through the same hassle of doing a studio, finding a studio. So I was like, why don't we just build one? So we found this little spot up the street, actually. And we slowly built a studio. It took us about 2 or 3 years. And we just did it just for us. It was built for our show.
Right.
So, and then we decided, we're only here once or twice a week. Might as well, if anybody else wants to use the equipment, they can come on in. So that became MZ Studios. We didn't expect it to be what it is today. We didn't expect to be in this nice little building with 2 studios and all that.
Right.
But that's kind of what it became just because, we needed a space.
So why did you get into, I don't know your buddy asked you, but why did you guys do internet radio? Because that was so before podcasts.
Yeah.
That basically was what a podcast is, So why did you stop pressing for radio and say, hey, I'm going to take this leap and go onto the internet?
Because the idea was we wanted to do a demo for stations. I had been approached by different stations over the years to produce demos for them, especially as a teenager. They wanted like a teen-centric talk show.
Okay.
And so I used to record a lot of demos. So the idea was we would take that same concept that I had done, however many years ago and do it again, but for a more kind of adult audience. Mm-hmm. And so we decided we would test this out and just kind of fiddle with it and
then that way you could say what you wanted. Yeah. You didn't have to go through all the restrictions.
And then everything. We could cut up the best parts of those, put it in the demo, and then pitch it to radio stations.
Wow.
That was the idea. That was the main concept.
Oh, that's smart.
And then it didn't really work out that way. So internet radio kind of dies. I didn't like the whole live thing, to be real honest with you. And so that kind of starts dying. but podcasts are starting to kind of take off. And so
Yeah.
we thought, well, you know, over the past, I don't know how many years we've been doing the show in a different, you know, different versions of it. We've been doing it for a long time, but we decided let's do more of the on-demand type situation, you know, instead of this live, because who listens to live stuff? You know,
Right.
I know you guys are sports guys. You watch sports shows.
Yeah.
But we live in a Netflix world, you know? People want things when they want
everything's
it.
frictionless, and you guys hopped on right when podcasting was getting really big.
Yeah.
And, I mean, my experiences come from radio, sportscasting, doing a lot of radio shows as well back in college and a little bit afterwards too. But podcast was always starting to gain popularity up until the point. And then I think in like 2010 onwards after that, it really took off.
Yeah.
And then in like 2014, it's like we're in like a big era of podcasting now, where it's just, you know, everybody's got to have one, you know, every celebrity's got one, every athlete has one.
Yeah.
And it's such a huge way. And I think it's kind of put to death the whole ad radio type of thing.
Yeah.
'Cause I listen to radio now and it's still the same. It's one segment for 3 minutes, go to an ad break.
Right.
Come back 3 minutes later. Oh, we're going to talk about this quick update, then go to another ad break.
Well, and I think it went right in line with the smartphones, right? When smartphones came out and you could have all your subscriptions right there. You could listen to whatever show whenever you want.
And that was the thing too. So I used to tell people all the time, internet radio, you know, I was the big, proponent for it. It's coming to cars. And there was rumors that people were going to put the ability to listen to internet radio in these built in cars like you do with
I think I
Sirius.
remember hearing the pitch or commercial about that.
So I used to tell people all the time, this is the future. This is what's going to be, you know, forget radio. This is where people are going.
Right.
And then, of course, it died off, right? But podcasts kind of took up. But you're right. It was when you had the ability now to stream whatever you wanted from your phone to your radio, I think is really, and you had, you know, you can listen to it anywhere in the world.
And you can skip the ads.
And you can listen to what you want. That's when it really started to take off.
Yeah. And Apple was kind of the big kind of corraller of this. You know, they started the whole thing with integrating podcasts into their iTunes, and then they had their own app that was bundled with the phone as well. And then once all these streaming services came on, then obviously Spotify kind of took the reins of everything, and you have so many other types of publishing networks and platforms, and so to speak, with that. I think it's become something so much bigger than what we're used to, and it's only going to continue to increase and kind of go from there. So how do you think podcasting has kind of changed the way that interviews are done, or changed the way things have been done in the past as opposed to like radio?
I think with for interviews, right? So you can now, because with like TV or radio, you're very constricted. You have to take a commercial break, like you guys were saying. You have to you have your whole day lined out where it's all time. You're always watching the clock, right? Oh, in 30 seconds I got to do this. 30 seconds I got to do that. With podcasting, you can do a 2-hour interview if you want. I don't recommend releasing a 2-hour interview, because who has 2 hours to sit and listen to it the whole time? But
anybody who's a fan of Joe Rogan, apparently.
Well, yeah, Joe does it all the time.
He does like 4-hour episodes.
Yeah, but he also splits them up and stuff too. I think you have to make them easily digestible, you know. But you can do that if you wanted to talk to somebody for 10 hours and release a 10-hour episode. You could absolutely do it.
Yeah, and
you can really start to get into somebody's psyche and their life and all that with the time. You don't have that with a 30-minute interview, you know, or whatever on radio. So that's definitely changed that way. I think it's also changed for, like, if you're a business, it's changed the way you can communicate with your customer. Because before, how do you communicate? Maybe a website, 30-second ad on TV, 30-second ad on radio, but you can't really express and explain why you do what you do, or why your service is so much better than the competitor. You can really do that on a podcast. You can take the time, you can meet the staff, you can do that, really talk about your life and all that. You can do that with a podcast.
Yeah.
And then for like a regular individual, it's like for me, it's a way to vent. It's a way to create. And that's I'm not an artist. I'm not a musician or anything. But to me, my show is my art. That's how I express myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting to me too, because I find I'm a big music fan, and I go to a lot of shows and meet these artists, and just talking to them and their process, and similar to your story, how they got involved. I just find that so interesting how it goes right in line. So maybe you don't play an instrument, but it's that same process of getting people together, finding out, okay, what's our theme, or what are we going to stand for? How are we going to do it? And then finding the audio side to it too.
Right.
How do you promote it? You're doing those same things. It's the same type of process.
Yeah.
So it's cool, because you're exactly right. It is an art, and it's another way to express people.
And that's one of the reasons why we started our podcast was we've always had
instead of just talking.
Yeah, huge long debates back and forth. Would it be about sports or life or, different topics and everything. And, I always liked the element of kind of like that media side to it. I worked at a podcasting company before my current job now. So it's always something that I've was interested in. So we're just like, why don't we just start a podcast then and just capture our crazy long debates on air,
right?
And
see what other people think about it. We maybe Will, you and me debate and talk about goofy stuff all the time, but then you open it up, someone hit you up on Twitter and say, hey, this is what I think, or I support this, or I disagree with that, and it opens this conversation and builds this community, and gets more people talking about certain things you're passionate about.
And we've always had kind of ideas of how we wanted to kind of make things better. We used to watching TV like, oh, I can make that better. Or I have an idea about that too. I think that's the beauty of podcasts is you can delve into such a niche audience, whether it be about music, movies, TV, or if you want to do a talk show, or if you want to do something about food or kickboxing or whatever it is. You can go so niche into that environment and it's accepted. Whereas on radio, you can't do that. You got to stick to broad topics that everyone will like, that the producers will like, and the network will enjoy.
It's all about ratings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in podcasting, it's not about rating. I mean, you might have sponsors and stuff, but you can do what you want.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of it too. And I think a lot of people have a misconception of, oh, I'm going to start a podcast and then get big like Joe Rogan or Barstool or something like that.
We hear that all the time.
Yeah. People don't understand it. It takes hours, hundreds of hours and hundreds of episodes, years even sometimes to garner a following and really build up an audience.
Yeah.
So what were some of the challenges that you faced kind of going into the podcasting realm when you were first starting out and then starting your show?
I think a lot of the challenges we faced were two things. One was a technical challenge because there wasn't a lot of documentation and software and knowledge out there to do what we wanted to do. Like if I had an idea to do something, we were kind of like not pioneering it, but we were trying to have to figure it out on your own. There's other people doing the same thing, but no one's communicating with each other. So
this is about 2006, right?
I would say this is probably 2008 now.
Okay.
This is when we're starting the new show, when we did a little bit more technical things. So it was a big technical challenge on how to, what's the best way to take a phone call? What's the best way to do this? And how do we play this? And, we had, in 2006, we had like 3 computers to run one show. It just, it was crazy. But how do we slim that down? How do we become a little bit more efficient? And then the other thing was trying to get people to listen, because again, in 2008 or 2009, 2010 is really when it starts picking up, right?
Yeah.
But 2008, no one's really listening to podcasts because they can't really, right? You're getting nobody really has unlimited data anymore at this point. They took it away. They gave it to us. They took it away. Nobody's got the app to really listen to podcasts. Nobody's got,
This was before Spotify as well, and iHeartRadio and all that kind of stuff.
Before iPhones, pretty much.
Right. So you got to kind of listen to it on the computer when you're at work, and then, what software do I need for that? And then it's also, a podcast used to have a very bad connotation. I used to tell people, especially when you're trying to book a guest, if I said, I want you to come on my podcast, people think it's like saying I was living in my mom's basement and playing Dungeons and Dragons every Thursday. That's what people thought about.
Right.
Like, who are you talking to? What's going on? What's this whole thing? So we had to kind of fight that barrier a little bit. And then we had that. So I, even to this day, I'm going back to the podcast thing. I even hate saying like my show, even though it's a podcast. I say on demand because I still have those negative connotations.
Right.
It's like flashbacks, my non-flashbacks when I say podcast, but that's what it is. And but now if you tell somebody you have a podcast, they're like, oh, well, what is it about? Like, where can I listen? Can I get it on iTunes or whatever? Now it's kind of
and I've found that
cool
too.
thing.
When we've reached out to people, we find people are more open to it because they know their voice is going to be heard.
Right.
They know they're going to be able to promote anything they want. They can say anything they want, and they can make that deeper connection. I feel like people are more. It fascinates me because I just think, like you said, 5-10 years ago, people were more, I don't know what that is, and
especially if you're a publicist, you're not going to want to send your, we in 2006 we interviewed like Bill Nye the Science Guy, which is crazy to me that we were nobody.
That's pretty cool. I geek out about that.
Yeah, who would let us talk to Bill Nye? Apparently, we did a good job at tricking the system, get past the guards there, but they let us talk to him. So, but a lot of times, a publicist's job is to protect their client. And so if I'm saying I got a podcast, they're going to be like, well, what's going on? Especially too, at that time, everyone who had a online radio show or, podcast, everyone was trying to be a Howard Stern. So everyone was shock jock Everyone was doing whatever they could, just very vulgar. There was no real thought behind the shows. So now if you go and you tell somebody, hey, I want to have your client on for as a guest on my podcast, they're more accepted to it because one, they know it's pre-recorded. You're not going to jump them live on air and they can't do anything about it. And they realize that it's, even though you may have 200 listeners or 2 million listeners, doesn't matter. Those are a dedicated audience that you're going to listen to the whole podcast. You're not going to just turn it on, listen for 30 seconds, turn it off. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and I agree. What's when Aaron reached out to Talia Paris and Ali Rose, the Playboy models, I was so shocked. I was like, okay, did they actually just agree to being on our podcast? Like, that was like our time, like our 6th or 7th episode. We didn't have a following then anyway. So, but I think they're more open to that, and they're able to say, okay, well, why not? Like, let's go on a podcast, talk about some things. It's more publicity for them. It's free publicity. Yeah. And all it takes is a retweet to go viral. That's it. And
I can retweet it, and both parties are helped.
Exactly.
I'm promoting their brand. They're promoting our brand. It's a mutual thing.
Yeah. And I really love the branding element because people think, well, okay, well, I can do this, but there's so much that goes into it. It's not just about the content. It's not just about the audio. You have to have, the logos with it. You got to make sure it's produced correctly, edited right as well. Michael, in your opinion, would you say that the audio quality is more important or the content is more important when having a successful podcast?
I would say and there's probably a lot of people that would disagree with me, but I would say the quality, only because you could have the worst, content, but if it's hard to listen to,
right?
You could have the best content, and if it's hard to listen to, I'm going to turn it off. So but you have a good content with good quality, I'm listening all day. Even if you have bad, content and you have good quality, I'll still probably listen. Maybe not the whole show, but I'll listen. So I think quality is important. If you're going to ask somebody to listen to you for 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is, you got to give them something. You got to give them something in return. I'm going to give you content. I'm going to give you good quality. So that way, you're not listening to somebody in like a big echoey house or whatever, somebody's office building and there's people talking in the background.
Right.
You want to really try to respect. I always try to think of it this way, as we're trying to respect the listener's time. Right? So why not try to go the extra mile and make it a little bit better quality? And
I've listened to some bad podcasts who've had some really bad audio quality, and immediately I'm just like, okay, even though the content's great, I'm turning it off.
It's hard to listen to, yeah.
And then I've had the opposite too, where it's great content, or it's bad content but really good audio. I'm like, okay, I'll stick it out, because they sound a little bit more legit.
Sounds like they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they sound like they know what they're doing too. So
yeah, and your experience, you have a lot of podcasts come through here in MZ Studios, and what does it take? There's so many people doing podcasts. Everyone thinks they can do it. What makes a successful podcast, and why do other ones fail?
I would say, and you guys have hit on this, it's people come in and they say, hey, I'm going to quit my job next month. I'm going to start my podcast, and I'm going to quit my job because I'm going to make a lot of money with my podcast.
Good luck with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, it's like a band.
Right.
It's the same thing.
It's exactly right. And I always use the example of, like, if you're going to go to LA and be an actor, are you just going to quit your job and, you're going to be the next Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. You're going to have to work your way through it. Same thing with a podcast. So, people underestimate the amount of work that's involved with it, about a lot of the prep. They come here, they might do the show, they think they do really well, and then they leave. They don't listen to themselves. I think that's also a big key.
I always listen to our podcast after, whether I'm on my way to work or in the morning getting ready.
Yeah.
Just to be like, okay, I should, tweak this, tweak that. Make sure we have more of a cadence here, and so on and so forth. So.
That's number one. I would say you have to listen to yourself, and you have, whether it's bad or not, you have to listen to it, because you'll know, all right, I'm bad at this, I got to work on this, I got to do so that, and putting in the work. You got to be consistent too. So if you're just coming in, you're recording a podcast every month, and then you release it. We have a guy on our show, he's got his own podcast, and he's recorded probably 10 episodes and released 3. Like, how are you going to build your audience that way?
Right.
So you have to be consistent, you have to put in the work, and you have to push it, and you can't just, a lot of people come in like, hey, my friend says I'm funny and that I'm interesting, and I she says I have to have a podcast. Well, that's not how it works. You have to put in time and energy, and you have to perfect your character too.
Yeah,
that's a big thing. You can't
I
just
find
go off it.
So just interesting, because I've heard podcasts and I listen to them, like, it's a comedy podcast, it's not funny, or this is an educational podcast, they're not giving anything insightful. But they do such a good job at building their brand, or they might have a catchphrase that clicks, they can put on merch, or they just are just go hard on social media and they're just promoting it, and really building that sense of community. And that community does not leave.
Right.
No, it doesn't.
Even if they're super average. And I've sat there and I'm like, why does this podcast work? This isn't very good. Mm-hmm. But then I look on their social media or just, keep listening to it and I hear those things, or like your guys' show. I mean, you have such a good chemistry there. To me, that's what makes your show great. It's not necessarily the content. I mean, the content, it's a good show. You guys have good guests. And that's,
I agree with you. It's all about it's about the relationships with the characters and the people on the show. That's what I think. It's never been about the content, our show. Because we did a show last week. We didn't have any content. And it was just about what was going on with everybody's deal. That's you have to have the personalities too.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't really like the Joe Rogan podcast too much. I think his personality is a little bit.
Are we adding him to the list?
Yeah,
are we going to have Joe Rogan on to defend
Joe Rogan's
now?
just getting caught out right now.
We're shooting for the stars on this.
But like you said, Aaron, he's so good. He has great guests, so that's why I listen to his podcast. He has a great branding presence as well, and he's very he's appealing in that sense. I don't like his personality on air.
He asks good questions, and we were talking about this off air. The people he picks, they're going to bring in their audience.
They're incredible.
Yeah. So even I don't care about Joe Rogan, but I watched a 3-hour episode with Elon Musk because I'm like, oh, well, what does he have to say? And even people are bigger fans of Elon Musk than me. They'll definitely come on. So he's already bringing on that, and that's his brand. Mm-hmm. And, it's a brand of, you're going to get good guests, you're going to get interesting questions, and you're going to have, insightful dialogue. There you go. Yeah. There's what to expect with the show.
Yeah. And I think the guests are probably a huge part of some of the podcast episodes that you do too, because you can just talk back and forth, forever, but you got to be able to have some compelling and different people come on to give different viewpoints. Now, Michael, you've been in the business for 15 years and interviewed a lot of people in the industry. I saw outside, there's a lot of photos with some medias and celebrities and everything. What are some of your favorite guests and maybe some of your best experiences with those interviews?
I was thinking about this because I thought this question might come up. I have a list, right, of kind of maybe my top 3. So Bill Nye was definitely up there because that was anybody that I grew up watching, and then now got to actually meet in real life.
It's so surreal when it happens in life.
It really is. And you're like, wait a minute, you were on a TV
because it's like they're a character. It's not even like they're a human. You just watch them on a screen,
right? And when you see them get older and stuff, or they pass away, that's even weirder because you're like, but they're not supposed to die. They're they're
they're immortal.
Or like when you see them, they look older,
right?
Like, but that's not what you look like,
right? So I would say Bill Nye the Science Guy would be number. I would do top 3 here. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Christopher Lloyd from Back to the Future.
Oh, nice! I saw that one right there.
He was great. He's such a nice guy, and I've met him a couple of times actually since then. And then my favorite one, I think I have to say, because it was such a big character that he played, and it's such a big pop culture thing, is Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock from Star Trek. I think that was my favorite one, and it was crazy because he called my house, and it was early in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. We were doing the interview from my house. And the phone disconnected at 2 minutes in. No. And I'm thinking, oh, man, this is it. How am I going to spin this? And I'm trying to think, because I think I'm done. This is it.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to think of how I can edit this in a way to where it's still kind of, usable. And a minute later, he calls back. He's like, hey, I think we got disconnected. And I'm like, this is, and I'm already flustered because I'm interviewing, Leonard Nimoy. Mm-hmm. And all those 3 interviews that I just mentioned too, they're all my worst interviews.
Really?
Because you get so nervous. And you write down all your questions. I write verbatim what I'm going to.
That's how I am too.
I even put my uhs in there, my pause. I put everything in my script. So I try to sound as natural as possible. Mm-hmm. And then I read it just like that. Then I screw it up. And then and it sounds like I'm reading. So I try to, these days I have a guideline. I still kind of write the same way, but I have a guideline, especially if it's a big guest. But back then I would, hey, Mr. Nimoy, it's that kind of thing. And so I can't listen to those, but they're still one of my favorite interviews.
Wow, so that's incredible. I saw some of the photos out there and I was blown away. Like Leonard Nimoy, one of my all-time favorites from Star Trek as well. Obviously Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies too.
So I'm the same way. I love that.
Yeah, I think that's incredible too. And the guests really do kind of make the show. And even if you are nervous and everything, I think that's okay because I mean I don't have too much experience with podcasting. When we had guests on, I was super nervous as well.
Well, and that's what I like about podcasts is they're raw and it's okay.
Yeah,
I feel and going back to radio versus podcasting, I feel like radio it's like watching the local news. You got to be all polished and look like you know what you're doing. Whereas podcasting, and when I started listening to podcasts, which was pretty recently, I was pretty late on the boat with that. And I was just amazed because I'm like, well, this isn't great. They're saying and
right.
They're forgetting what they're talking about, or they're kind of all over the place. But then it's like, well, that's cool though.
It's a conversation. That's how people
it's a conversation, and it feels like you're with your friends.
Right.
It's like, it feels like you're just talking to a guy at a bar or something like that.
There's a radio show in Dallas. It's not the same show that it was back when, in its prime, but it's called The Russ Martin Show. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it.
I've heard of that.
I think I've heard of it too.
One of the things I used to listen to them all the time when I was growing up, and they were a big influence for me too. But one thing that Russ always did was his show never felt like a professional, polished show, right? It was always, they did stuff on the air they probably should have been doing off air, mic checks and things like that, but it made it feel real. And that's what he did the things you weren't supposed to do. And that's what I loved about it. And that's why I always try to implement stuff like that into our show, because it gives it a little bit more depth.
Yeah, I like how when you guys come in just talking.
Yeah.
It's like just you're chit-chatting.
I kind of stole that from Russ Martin, actually.
Then you get into the intro. It's cool.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people do it. I wouldn't say it's original, but it's your brand,
right.
and it brings it down to earth. So
right.
Yeah.
I really like that. It's a simple little thing that when I listen to your show, I was like, okay, now I'm interested.
Well, it's also, we started doing that because sometimes it's hard to start a show. And I always say the most important thing is starting and ending a show, right? Because if you start a little awkward, the show's awkward. But if you start strong, the show usually does really, really well.
Kind of warms you up for talking.
Yeah. So that's why I think we kind of skip the pleasantries and like, hey, this is so-and-so. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I'm just not good at it. And it throws me off. And so we don't do that.
We were talking about, it's scripted.
Right.
You can tell.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do this.
But you guys have like an intro and stuff, and it works for you guys. And I like the way you guys do your stuff. And so
that's all Will.
But
I
like
I appreciate it.
I really do.
DJ career now.
Yeah. For
the
me,
radio days coming back.
If I do something like that, because it's not my personality, if I do something like that, it throws me all off. And then if somebody asks me a question, I gotta think on my feet. I'm like, because I experimented
with kind of how you intro your shows and just kind of starting and I like that idea, but I didn't really think it really fit our personalities or kind of
it doesn't go with like the theme.
I think the way you guys do it fits the format very well.
If we had a more conversational kind of like chit chat type of show type of thing, then we would definitely do that. But I think when I'm writing the intro script for everything, I'm like, okay, well, I want to make sure I touch upon all the social media handles, make sure it's intricate
and you don't sound like you're reading, by the way.
Oh well, thank you. I appreciate that because I totally am.
He says the same thing every time, though.
Well, I know, but still, it doesn't sound like it, which is great.
I think it's important to kind of give people an idea of what our show is about because we're still pretty small,
right?
And
don't tell the people that.
Well, we're pretty niche type of show too. I mean, so we got to understand, make sure people understand what our show's about,
right?
Too.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever listen to a podcast called Serial?
Yeah, that's kind of what actually threw the podcast out to the mainstream. Yeah.
They kickstarted the whole kind of genre, and then it was like 2014 or something.
Yeah,
and it really kicked off.
And everybody's like, "Oh, I've heard about these podcasts. Now I got to listen." Yeah.
That's.
Can I throw a name out there? For you guys, Macaulay Culkin. So
Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah. So Macaulay Culkin. That's his name now officially. I forgot. So he does that Bunny Ears podcast. Going back to kind of a point you made earlier. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, but. His show I thought was really good. Season 1, they were just him and a guy named Matt Cohen. I think that's his name. They would just talk about games and TV shows and like growing up and then whatever reminisce. And now it's straight Macaulay interviewing celebrities, and it's okay, but it's not the show that I like. Like I liked when it was just them talking about whatever it is that they were growing up on or whatever. I like that. So maybe if you get him on.
Sure,
you can challenge.
We're gonna throw out Macaulay Culkin then for the names here. So
I watched DMX with Macaulay Culkin one time on accident. Yeah, in Dallas actually.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So
it was very surreal.
Both of them on the show.
Yeah. I never had any one of them. Yeah. So
the next you got to get Macaulay Culkin on.
That would be great. I would love to have Macaulay on. Yeah,
we'll take DMX and you can have Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah, knock on wood. We have somebody from Home Alone coming on next week. Yeah,
is it Joe Pesci or?
It's not Joe. I wish it was. He was talking about The Irishman.
Yeah,
which is great by the way. If you haven't seen that,
no, it's a good movie. I got to check that out.
A little long, but
you have to. I watched it in 4 days.
Yeah, you got to split it up.
Yeah.
It's like a long podcast.
Yeah,
you got to just take it in chunks.
Right.
So
obviously podcasting is not going to be slowing down anytime soon. I think we're still not even at like the peak of it, so to speak. We're still kind of on that crescendo of the podcasting's popularity. Where do you see podcasting going, Michael, and the future of it, and if it's going to get more popular?
It's funny. We were talking about this actually a couple of days ago. I kind of because we've been in it for so long that I feel like, oh, we're on the decline, you know, because I don't know. I'm stuck in a studio all day. I don't know what's going on out there.
Right.
So I always feel like we're on a decline, but I hope it gets bigger and better, you know, because like I said, we built the studio because we built it for our stuff to create, right? And we hope that people come in here and create, or wherever you're at, you know, you create this thing. We want there's like 700, 800,000 podcasts out there right now.
Wow.
I don't think we're quite at 1 million, but it's getting close. And let's get to 1 million. You know, there needs to be a podcast for everything. And I think that if you have the itch to do it, you should do it. Like that's, you know, I've been doing this for a long time not because I'm good at it, because it's the only thing I can do. You know what I mean? Like it feels like I can't stop doing it. There have been times where we've had a hiatus where we're not doing a show, and I always feel like, man, I wish I could talk about what happened this week on the show, or I wish I could interview this person when they come into town, but I don't have a show.
Right.
So I do it because I don't do it for the money. I don't do it for fame. I don't do it for anything like that. And like I said, I don't do it because I think I'm talented and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I just do it because this is all I can do. This is the drive. It's the itch that I can't scratch. So I do it because of that. So I hope that people that are like that have the idea to do it and are willing to put in the work, that continue to do it, and we continue to grow, you know, this whole genre.
Well, and that's what I love about it too, is because it's so young, there's no formula. You know, no one knows, okay, when I reach 200 episodes, then my podcast is getting old. I need to, you know, start a new one because this is going to die out. I mean, maybe 200 is nothing. You don't know. I mean, Joe Rogan, bring him up again.
He's got like 1,000 episodes.
Yeah, he's got, like it's crazy. And I mean, that's going to keep happening. And I feel like 10, 20, 30 years from now, then people are going to start getting, okay, this is how you should do it. And it'll be more formulaic.
It's more of a past precedent then.
Right. Whereas now every single podcast, I don't care how popular you are or how famous you are, it's trial and error. I mean, even the biggest shows in the world, it's still trial and error, and they're figuring things out. And other shows are, like we talked about earlier, they're taking a little bit, some pieces off that, trying it for themselves. Okay, now this worked with several podcasts. This is how you should do it. But I do like it how, like we talked about before, you could just go in and do whatever you want, and you'll hit somebody. Someone it'll resonate with some group, and you can do it that way if you want to.
It might take a while.
Yeah.
You might have to, like you said,
you can learn as you go. And I like that part where it's not okay, come in and I have to do it this way. It's, I can just keep learning and getting better and figuring out your style and how to do it. Yeah. And then just roll with it.
Yeah. And Michael, I liked your point earlier where you said it's that itch you can't scratch and everything. And that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast, is why I love doing it so much. You know, if I'm having a kind of a rough day, I'm like, okay, I got to do some podcast prep. And then I really get into it. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is awesome. Like,
we missed doing a radio, because Will and I did a radio at SLU, and it's been, 4, 5, 6 years since we did it. So it's cool to kind of rekindle that passion again, but also do it in a different way and talk about, we're not limited to just talking about sports. We can talk about whatever we want or what's on our mind, or if we're passionate about something this week, we hit each other up. Hey, let's do this because this is on my mind, or I saw this in the news. Let's do it.
Yeah, I agree. So with podcasting being so big, Michael, and you have such a big background in radio, what do you think radio needs to do? I mean, is it totally going to die off in the next 3, 4, 5 years, or can radio salvage some of the things that get to where podcasting is?
I thought it was going to die off, to be honest with you. About this time, I thought it would start dying, and it may still die.
I think it's on the decline.
Yeah,
still.
I don't think it's not as popular as it once was, for sure. I mean, especially with like millennials and things like that. Who listens to radio? I don't listen. I can't tell you the last time I listened to radio. But I listen to Spotify or podcasts or whatever. But eventually it is going to die off, I think. So I think in order to really change that, you can't base your station off of like an algorithm. You can't just go off a playlist. You have to invest in personalities. And because that's what's going to make or break you, I think.
And they can take a lesson from podcasting. Then.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how that worked.
Yeah, the personalities left radio and went to podcasting a lot of times. So and they did better there. Adam Carolla, who kind of was one of the first big podcasters out there before Joe and everybody, he left radio in Los Angeles and went into podcasting. I don't know if he was fired or left, but anyway, he went to podcasting and did really well at it.
There you go.
And proved that there was a market for it,
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's so many different types of episodes and topics that you can talk about. And like you said, everybody should have a podcast. Everyone should have just something that they're talking about. And, whether it be to educate or to inform, or whether it be to entertain or anything, like that's why we do this, is because it's fun and we love talking about whatever crazy topics we've got coming up. So.
Well, I think too, for me, because I've done a show almost every year, of my life for the past however many years. And it's kind of like a journal in a sense. And it's something you didn't think about, but you listen back to, an episode from 2006, like, wow, I was going through that at that time, or this was happening, and, that kind of thing. And this was going on in the world. And so it's kind of a cool little way to document what's going on in your life.
Yeah. So before we get you out of here, I'm just curious, what's the future of podcasting? Like, where is that going? Do you think the future is really bright? Are there going to be setbacks that are around the corner? Like, where do you think that's going? Because it's still so
I
young.
hope it's bright. The only thing I'm nervous about is having podcasts be a little bit more corporate based. You know what I mean? As far as like big networks taking over, and you have to do it this way, and you can say this thing, and the FCC getting involved, and things like that.
And it just kind of just replaces
it's radio again, right? So that's what I think that's very important for podcasters and people that enjoy podcasting. If something like that starts coming down the pike, that you take appropriate action, whether it's to, write your congressman or whatever, because there's been situations like that where it's happened, it's gotten close. There's been FCC has been trying to regulate podcasts or internet radio or whatever it is over the years. And, it's kind of been pushed down. But if you see something like that happen, that's what we got to fight against, because we got to remain free and to do whatever we want to do.
Want to have podcasts remember why they started.
Right.
And not try to be like radio.
Right.
Be like podcasts. Be
exactly.
your own thing.
Be your own thing. That's great. Yeah.
And I was researching this topic too, and Apple is going to try and get into like sponsoring and publishing their own branded podcasts, so to speak, through Apple. And Spotify is doing the same with the acquisition. I think of it's with Anchor and like a couple different platform sites as well.
I think that's a great example. I think that's going to be kind of the next phase of stuff, is more
branded podcasts.
Well, I think more of just specialty. It's going to be kind of a network type situation, like that, like an on-demand, like a Netflix type situation. But I think also we're going to see a rise in, hopefully, in audio dramas and things like that, because it's more like, TV on tape, essentially.
Yeah. Did you ever listen to a podcast called the No Sleep Podcast?
I've heard about it. I haven't listened to it.
They're a really good podcast. They do kind of more horror stories, but it's very much like audio dramas.
Yeah.
They play characters. They have, each story is about 30, 40 minutes long, but these are really good, engaging voice actors that go onto the podcast, and they essentially it's like you're watching a TV show.
And I think that's the next
excellent too. Excellent podcast as well.
Yeah.
So.
No, we have one we're working on now, which now that we're working on it and we're looking at other audio dramas, not as a studio, we're working on it. We're seeing more and more of those pop up, and I think it's going to take a while for it to really take off. But I think you're going to have people like Apple or Spreaker or whoever do their own like that, and it'll be you might do a subscription based deal, $5 a month or whatever, but you're going to have catered programming like that. That's the word I was looking for, catered.
Yeah. Well, I think the future is going to be very bright for podcasting, not so much for radio. But Michael, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. If you like the conversation with Michael Zavala, check him out on his podcast, MZNOW. He's all up on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. He's also got his own website too, mznow.tv. He's got full shows there, exclusive interviews, and more. So check him out. Michael, where can they find you up on social media?
At Michael Zavala. That's it.
Very
simple.
That's very simple then.
Yeah.
So you're up
and
on...
check out MZ Studios if you want to have your podcast.
MZStudiosDallas.com.
Yeah, we'll put all the descriptions for all the handles and links down in the description below. Check out our last episode too, where we talk with Playboy model Talia Paris and her career in modeling and how Instagram changed the game. You can follow us on Twitter at Weekendology Pod. We're up on YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, all that kind of stuff. We're also part of Big Red World Publishing Network. They're on Twitter at Big Red Social, and their website is bigredworld.org.
I can tell what your favorite episode we've done, Will.
Which one is that?
The one you just mentioned.
Exactly. So there you go. I got to plug that one as much
we
as
have plugged
possible.
that so many times, so check that out, please.
Yes, please. But yeah, Merry Christmas to everybody again. We wish everybody and every listener, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you. We're going to be back every episode, new episodes every Friday, so check us out, but we'll see you guys next week.